Yeah.
Let's debunk low carb myths.
Okay.
Because low carb diets have been positioned as a silver bullet for everything from weight loss to metabolic syndrome, but carbs are not the enemy. Am I right?
You're right. Bad cooking is the enemy. Okay, carbohydrates. How do we define carbohydrates? You've got your carbohydrates like pasta and rice and potato and things that are white. You have your anthocyanins, like you're talking about, vegetables and fruits. And then you've got we covered rice, and then, like your processed, highly palatable, ultra-processed foods.
Yeah.
Now, the first question is, I think that we all want to know is how do we design a nutrition plan and a diet for a healthy metabolism? We can agree upon that.
Yeah, of course.
We know that there's carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and that carbohydrates are not an essential nutrient, meaning your body can make all the carbohydrates it needs. So if we were to think about something on the high end, for every 100 grams of protein, your body will generate 60 grams of carbohydrates. It's probably on the high end, but it's somewhere along the lines of that.
Is that gluconeogenesis? Is that what you're describing?
That's exactly right. Gluconeogenesis. But dietary protein is an essential macronutrient, and you need more of it as you age. Essential fatty acids, they're only roughly maybe 4 grams. So it's minimal. Now, as Americans, do you know how many carbohydrates we eat on average?
I'm going to take a guess that it's in the hundreds.
Yes. It's in the 300s.
Damn.
The average American eats 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. The RDA, take it or leave it, is set at 130 grams. However, that is 2 standard deviations above what is felt to be necessary. What do I mean by that? 80 grams of glucose is what we need. And that doesn't mean that we need to eat it. That's how much we need for body function. So there's the obligatory use, the brain, the red blood cells, the kidney, then there's the organ systems, then there's muscle, which doesn't burn many carbohydrates at rest. It burns primarily fatty acids. So this is how, and then obviously some get stored as glycogen. The 80 gram amount is something that we know is safe, and again, we can generate it all. Now, the next question is, if it is set at 2 standard deviations at 130 grams of carbohydrates, do we actually need that? Is that safe? Or do we need to earn our carbohydrates? And I would say that how we make carbohydrate decisions is twofold. How many carbohydrates can you eat in a 24-hour period of time? So just like we think about protein, right? So our protein decision is how much protein do you need in a 24-hour period? And then depending on how high that is, you worry about distribution. The first meal, the last meal. But we don't talk about that for carbohydrates, do we?
Mm-mm.
Have you ever thought of the carbohydrate threshold?
I've not. And I think part of the reason has to do with the fact that carbohydrates are relatively easy to consume, whereas protein takes more work. It's more expensive. Protein tends to be more pricey.
Unless you come to your house and you have protein chips.
Fair, yes.
Okay. So the first meal, if you think about carbohydrates, now carbohydrates, glucose is toxic to the body at high levels. So we need a certain amount to maintain blood sugar, but anything above that is considered toxic and abnormal. In fact, in a 2-hour period, we have a name for that. If your glucose remains elevated, and that is?
Type 2 diabetes.
Exactly. We do not have a name for that for protein. This is with the understanding that elevated levels of blood glucose can be toxic to the body. And you release insulin, you have a high carbohydrate load, you use insulin to move glucose out of the bloodstream into cells. This should not be used every day. We do not want to depend on insulin to move glucose out of the bloodstream. We, number one, don't want to have too many carbohydrates at that one meal. And number two, we have to use our muscle to move glucose out of the bloodstream into muscle without the use of insulin. Okay, so this is like a very long-winded story. The other aspect of carbohydrates, and we're going to come back to, are carbohydrates bad? And I think that they're bad for some people. If 74% or so of Americans are either overweight or obese, I'm assuming they have some kind of, if not overt, metabolic dysregulation, right? So when we begin to think about how we design a diet, and everybody talks about carbohydrates, is how many carbohydrates per day. But it really comes down to how many carbohydrates per meal. And how do we dispose of those carbohydrates if we are sedentary? The answer to that is roughly, I wouldn't have anyone go over 40 or so grams of carbohydrates at a meal. Beyond that, you begin to distort metabolism. And the number could be 50. But outside of exercise, then you're going to have challenges with, over time, distorting your metabolism.
It probably varies according to body size and more specifically muscle mass, right? Like a small under-muscled lady might effectively dispose of a much lower dose bolus of glucose as compared to a 220-pound
I think that's a really great point.
Bodybuilding male.
Yes, and I think that's a really great point, that skeletal muscle is your primary site for glucose disposal. As we age and people become more inactive, you have less muscle mass. And, there's muscle atrophy from disuse and denervation and medications, all kinds of reasons that we are up against, chronic inflammation, that we lose, and sedentary behavior, that we lose skeletal muscle. However, when it comes to carbohydrates, if we were to correct for carbohydrate intake, I think we can put the body in somewhat of a safety space where we can really begin to, number one, stop chasing blood sugar regulation, and number two, really begin to focus on and prioritize protein. So that first meal of the day, again, carbohydrate consumption, are carbohydrates bad? No. Do you have to earn your carbohydrates? Yes. Is a low-carb diet helpful? Yes, especially if you have metabolic dysregulation. And how I would define that is metabolic syndrome. So, percent body fat over 30, high blood pressure, elevated triglycerides, elevated insulin, elevated glucose. People will say that is a diagnosis of metabolic syndrome. And I would say, and you would say, that is a diagnosis of unhealthy skeletal muscle. Because what we are seeing is the muscle's inability to be able to manage those metabolites.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.